My name is Athena Myers, and I'm 35 years old. 10 years ago, my family disowned me for leaving an abusive marriage. A marriage my father insisted I stay in for the family's reputation. Last month, I returned for his funeral, where my siblings publicly mocked me as a gold digger. They said I only showed up to claim inheritance money I didn't deserve. But they had no idea about the monthly payments I'd been sending anonymously for Dad's medical care, or about the video message he recorded before he died. When that video played in the lawyer's office, with 20 family members watching, everything changed. The truth about who really abandoned whom was about to destroy every lie they'd been telling for a decade. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is what happened that day. The law offices of Whitfield and Associates occupied the entire 14th floor of a glass tower in downtown Portland. I arrived 5 minutes late. Traffic had been brutal, though part of me wondered if I'd subconsciously delayed facing what waited inside. The reception area was already packed when I walked in. 23 family members by my quick count, all dressed in their funeral blacks from yesterday's service. The conversation died the moment I appeared. Every head turned, and the silence felt like a physical weight pressing against my chest. I recognized most of them: aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen since before my divorce. Some looked away immediately. Others stared with open curiosity. A few whispered behind raised hands. Lindsay sat in the front row, of course. My older sister had always needed to be first, best, most important. Her designer suit probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked up from her phone, and her perfectly glossed lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "The gold digger finally shows up," she announced to the room, her voice carrying that special tone she'd perfected in high school, sweet on the surface, poison underneath. Marcus sat beside her, my older brother who'd inherited Dad's square jaw and apparently his talent for judgment. He didn't even look at me, just shook his head slowly, theatrically, like I was a disappointment he'd long ago learned to expect. I found an empty chair in the back corner, as far from them as possible. The whispers resumed immediately, fragments drifting over. 10 years. Never called. Showing up now. The money. Through the glass conference room door, I could see Mr. Whitfield shuffling papers at the long mahogany table. Something about the way he glanced up at me, then quickly away, made my stomach tighten. There was something in that look I couldn't quite read. Marcus stood up before I'd even settled into my chair. "Does she even have a right to be here?" He addressed the room like he was leading a board meeting, not discussing his sister's presence at their father's will reading. "She abandoned this family. Abandoned him." 10 years, Lindsay added, her voice dripping with practiced hurt. 10 years without a single visit, not one birthday card, not even when the doctor said he might not make it through the surgery. Aunt Carol nodded vigorously from her seat. "Poor Robert. He used to ask about you, Athena, in the beginning." I kept my eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, counting my breaths. 1, 2, 3. Don't react. Don't give them the satisfaction. "She's probably in debt," Lindsay stage whispered to Cousin Beth. "Single mothers usually are. Bet she heard about the estate value and suddenly remembered she had a father." "I'm here because he was my father, nothing more." The words came out steady, controlled. I'd practiced them in the car, knowing I'd need them. Marcus laughed, sharp and bitter. "Father? You don't get to call him that. Not after what you did." The conference room door opened, and James Whitfield stepped out. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-50s, with silver at his temples, and the kind of presence that commanded attention without raising his voice. "If everyone could please take their seats in the conference room." His eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on me. Again that look, like he knew something the rest of us didn't. "We have specific procedures to follow today, per Mr. Myers' explicit instructions." As everyone filed toward the conference room, I stayed seated, letting them go first. I didn't need another confrontation in the doorway. But as I finally stood to follow, Mr. Whitfield caught my eye and nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, almost like reassurance. Sitting in that conference room, surrounded by family who'd become strangers, my mind drifted to the day everything changed. 10 years ago, almost to the month. I'd finally worked up the courage to leave Derek. The bruises on my ribs hidden beneath a cardigan as I stood in my parents' living room, begging for support. If you leave him, don't come back. Dad's words had been final, absolute. Marriage is sacred. You don't run when things get difficult. What will people think? Mom had stood behind him, silent, her hands wringing a dish towel. She'd seen the signs. I know she had. But reputation mattered more than her daughter's safety. The first year after leaving was the hardest. Caleb was barely 2 months old when I walked out with just a diaper bag and my purse. No job, no savings, no family. I slept on a friend's couch for 3 months while I found work. First one waitressing job, then two. 14-hour days with a baby strapped to my chest during the lunch shift at a diner that looked the other way. Not one call from my family. Not one text asking if we were okay, if we had food, if my baby had what he needed. They'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. But I'd known about Dad's declining health. Small towns talk, and Portland wasn't that big. When I heard about his heart problems 5 years ago, about the mounting medical bills Lindsay complained about at her book club, I'd made a decision. Every month, $5,000 wired from a shell company I'd set up. Enough to cover the best cardiac specialists, private nurses, experimental treatments. Family means standing by each other, even when they're wrong, apparently. I'd whisper to myself each time I authorized the transfer, watching my own account drain while Caleb and I ate ramen for the third night in a row. The conference room had exactly 25 chairs. I knew because I counted them while everyone filed in, claiming their spots like territory. Not one person shifted to make room for me at the main table. I ended up against the wall, balancing a legal pad on my knee. Lindsay looked over at me and smirked. Mr. Whitfield, before we begin, shouldn't we verify that everyone present has legal standing? I mean, some people abandon their family for a decade and then show up expecting… what exactly? I can provide documentation of her legal status if needed, Mr. Whitfield replied calmly, organizing his papers. Though I assure you, everyone here has been specifically included in the proceedings. Single mother struggles, Marcus muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Probably can't even afford a lawyer if she wanted to contest anything. Aunt Carol leaned over to her daughter. Poor life choices tend to compound, don't they? First the divorce, then cutting off family, and now… She gestured vaguely in my direction. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, something shifted. They thought I was nothing, weak, desperate, beaten down by a decade of single motherhood and minimum wage survival. They had no idea about the promotion I'd earned last year, the small business I'd started on the side, the college fund I'd managed to build for Caleb despite everything. Let them think what they wanted. I'd learned long ago that being underestimated was sometimes an advantage. Mr. Whitfield cleared his throat. Before we proceed with the reading of the will, there are some procedural matters we need to address. He pulled out a sealed envelope and, surprisingly, a USB drive. Your father left very specific instructions about the order of today's proceedings. Lindsay rolled her eyes. Always dramatic, even from beyond. But I noticed Marcus had gone still, his confident posture suddenly rigid. Something about those procedural matters had caught his attention too. Can you imagine being mocked by your own family at your father's funeral? Being called a gold digger when you haven't asked for a single penny? If you've ever been misunderstood or judged unfairly by family, you'll understand what I felt in that moment. But sometimes, the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had family completely misjudge your intentions? Let me know below. Now, let me tell you what was really at stake that day. Sitting there, surrounded by hostile faces, I realized exactly what my silence would cost me. It wasn't about money. It never had been. But if I let their version of events stand, if I walked out without saying anything, The narrative would be set in stone. Athena, the daughter who abandoned her dying father for a decade, then showed up with her hand out when he was gone. That story would follow me, follow Caleb. He'd grow up hearing whispers at family gatherings he'd never be invited to. Your mother only cared about money. She left Grandpa to die alone. She's the reason the family split apart. I'd spent 10 years rebuilding my life, my reputation, my sense of self after the divorce. Built a career, friendships, a community that knew me as someone reliable, caring, trustworthy. But family stories have a way of spreading, especially in Portland's surprisingly small professional circles. Lindsay worked in real estate, Marcus in banking. Between them, they knew half the business community. If they wanted to poison my reputation, they could. And looking at their faces, I knew they would. But if I defended myself now, if I protested or argued, I'd look exactly like what they claimed: desperate, grasping, guilty. It was a trap with no good exit. Mr. Whitfield opened his leather portfolio and pulled out several documents, but he also placed that USB drive prominently on the table, right next to an envelope with Dad's handwriting on it. My heart stuttered. I recognized that handwriting, even from across the room. "Before we read the will," Mr. Whitfield said, checking his watch, "there's something else. Something your father insisted must come first." Lindsay crossed her arms. "Just get on with it. Some of us have actual responsibilities to get back to." But Mr. Whitfield was already standing, moving toward the flat screen mounted on the wall. "Before we proceed," Mr. Whitfield said, "you should all understand the scope of what we're discussing today. Mr. Myers's estate is more substantial than you might expect." Lindsay leaned forward, her hostility momentarily replaced by interest. Marcus pulled out his phone, probably opening his calculator app. They thought they knew what was coming. They'd been managing Dad's finances for the last 5 years, after all. Or so they believed. "The primary residence on Laurelhurst is valued at $2.3 million, Whitfield continued. The investment portfolio, as of market close yesterday, stands at $5.7 million. There are also several smaller assets: cars, artwork, a cabin in Bend." Aunt Carol gasped. Cousin Beth's eyes went wide. Even I felt my breath catch. I'd known Dad had done well with his construction business. But this? $8 million total, Marcus said, already doing the math. "Split 2 ways, that's..." "3 ways," Lindsay corrected sharply, glancing at me. "Unfortunately." They'd already decided how to divide it. I could see it in their faces. They'd probably already contacted real estate agents about the house, financial advisors about the portfolio. Lindsay kept talking about renovating her kitchen. Marcus had mentioned a new boat at the funeral. Mr. Whitfield glanced at his watch again. It was such a small gesture, but something about it felt deliberate, like he was timing something specific. "The distribution of assets will be addressed shortly," he said carefully. "But first, as I mentioned, there are your father's specific instructions to follow." He picked up the USB drive, weighing it in his hand like it contained something heavy. "This was recorded 2 months ago in this very room. Your father was quite insistent that it be played before anything else." Lindsay laughed nervously. "Bit dramatic for Dad, isn't it?" But I saw Marcus shift in his seat, that confidence cracking just slightly. Something was coming. We could all feel it. Before Mr. Whitfield could move toward the screen, Lindsay stood up abruptly. "Wait, before we waste time on whatever this is, let's address the elephant in the room." "She abandoned him," Lindsay pointed at me, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Never sent a birthday card," Marcus added, standing too. "Not even at Christmas," Aunt Carol chimed in, eager to pile on. "She didn't visit once," Cousin Beth added. "Not once in 10 years. "Gold digger," someone muttered from the back. "Check her legal standing," Lindsay demanded, turning to Mr. Whitfield. "She forfeited her rights when she walked away." "Probably needs money," Marcus said. "Single mom, dead-end job." "That's enough." Mr. Whitfield's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He didn't raise it, didn't shout, but something in his tone made everyone freeze. "We proceed as instructed. Anyone who cannot maintain appropriate decorum will be asked to leave and, according to your father's will, forfeits their inheritance." The room went silent. Lindsay slowly sat down, her face flushed. Marcus remained standing for a moment longer, trying to maintain some dignity, before taking his seat. I hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. My hands were folded in my lap, my breathing steady. I'd learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Mr. Whitfield walked to the screen and inserted the USB into the laptop connected to it. Your father was very particular about this process. He left detailed instructions, witnessed and notarized. He pulled out the sealed envelope, holding it up for everyone to see. This contains amendments to his will, to be opened only after you've seen what he recorded. The screen flickered to life. And there he was. Dad. Thinner than I remembered, frailer, but his eyes were clear and focused. My throat tightened. It was the first time I'd seen his face in 10 years. Everyone will remain seated and silent during this video, Mr. Whitfield announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. These are your father's explicit wishes, documented and legally binding. Any interruption, any outburst, will result in immediate removal from these proceedings. Lindsay opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Whitfield raised his hand. Mrs. Patterson, that includes you, especially you. The formal use of her married name made Lindsay flinch. She wasn't used to being put in her place, especially not in front of family. Your father spent considerable time preparing this message, Whitfield continued. He wanted to ensure everything was done correctly, legally, and most importantly, fairly. He emphasized the last word, his eyes sweeping the room. He was very particular about the process, very particular about the order. Everything that happens today has been carefully orchestrated according to his final wishes. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. This is ridiculous. We don't need some dramatic... Mr. Myers, Whitfield interrupted, would you prefer to forfeit your inheritance now, or would you like to honor your father's last request? The threat landed. Marcus's mouth snapped shut. $8 million was enough to buy anyone's silence, at least temporarily. I noticed several family members pulling out their phones, probably hoping to record whatever was coming. Mr. Whitfield noticed too. Recording devices away, please. This is privileged information. Anyone who violates this directive will face legal action. He waited while phones disappeared into pockets and purses. There's a reason for everything that's about to happen. Your father thought long and hard about this moment, about what needed to be said and who needed to hear it. He moved back to the laptop, his finger hovering over the play button. Some of you may find this difficult to hear, but truth often is. The room held its breath. Even I found myself leaning forward slightly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mr. Whitfield connected the USB drive to his laptop with deliberate precision, each movement measured and purposeful. The click of the connection seemed to echo in the silent room. He pulled up a video file labeled simply, "For my family, Robert Myers, Final Testament." This was recorded 2 months ago, he explained, adjusting the screen so everyone could see clearly. August 15th to be exact, Mr. Myers requested 2 witnesses be present during the recording, myself and Dr. Patricia Hernandez, his physician, to verify his mental capacity. Lindsay let out a nervous laugh. Bit dramatic, don't you think? All this ceremony for what? A thank you speech to his real family? But her voice wavered. Something about the setup, the witnesses, the formal documentation, suggested this was more than a simple farewell message. Marcus shifted in his chair, his earlier confidence evaporating. Why would he need his doctor there? To prevent any challenges to his mental state, Whitfield replied simply. Your father wanted to ensure there could be no questions about his capacity or intentions. I noticed the date on the file, August 15th. My stomach clenched. That was 3 days after I'd sent the largest payment yet, nearly $20,000 for an experimental treatment his insurance wouldn't cover. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. The screen showed a frozen frame of my father, sitting in this very room, at this very table. Even in the still image, I could see how much weight he'd lost, how the illness had carved deep lines into his face. But his eyes were sharp, alert, alive with something I couldn't quite identify. Your father insisted this be played first, Whitfield repeated, his finger hovering over the play button. Before any discussion of assets, before any reading of the will. This message, he said, was the most important thing he would leave behind. Mr. Whitfield held up the sealed envelope, angling it so everyone could see the notary seal, the witnesses' signatures, and most importantly, the date stamp. This envelope contains amendments to Mr. Meyer's will, executed 6 weeks before his passing, to be opened only after the video message. We have a right to see that now. Lindsay stood halfway out of her chair. As primary executors, Marcus and I should review any amendments before. You are not executors, Mrs. Patterson. Whitfield's correction was swift and precise. Your father changed that designation as well. Everything will be revealed in due time as he instructed. Lindsay sank back into her seat, her face flushing red. Marcus grabbed her arm, whispering something harsh in her ear. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with confidential, to be opened only in the presence of all beneficiaries, stamped across it in red ink. I could see Dad's signature across the seal, along with 2 other signatures I didn't recognize. After the video, as instructed, Whitfield repeated, placing the envelope prominently on the table where everyone could see it, but no one could reach it. Several family members had their phones out again, despite the earlier warning. Cousin Tom was definitely recording, trying to be subtle about it. Whitfield either didn't notice or chose not to address it yet. The date on the envelope caught my eye again. 6 weeks ago. That was right after I'd set up the private nursing service, the one that cost $8,000 a month but provided round-the-clock care. The one I'd paid for by selling my car and taking on freelance work every weekend. Had someone told him? Had he somehow found out? Everything will make sense soon, Whitfield said, his finger finally pressing play. Your father made sure of that. The screen came to life, and my father began to speak. But before Dad could say more than, "If you're watching this," Lindsay shot to her feet, her control finally snapping completely. "Stop! Just stop!" She whirled on me, her perfectly manicured finger pointing like a weapon. "She doesn't deserve to be here. She doesn't deserve a penny." The room erupted. Mr. Whitfield reached for the pause button, but Lindsay was already in full performance mode, playing to her audience of sympathetic relatives. "I sat by his bedside for months." Her voice cracked with practiced emotion. "Every single night when he was in the ICU. Where were you, Athena? Where were you when he was crying out in pain?" "The medical bills," Marcus added, standing beside his sister in solidarity. "Do you have any idea what we paid, what we sacrificed? I took out a second mortgage." "She wasn't there," Aunt Carol added. "Not for the surgeries, not for the chemo, not for anything." "Probably off with another deadbeat boyfriend," someone muttered. Cousin Tom had his phone up openly now, recording everything. The family drama he'd capture would fuel gossip for years. Lindsay stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that still carried across the room. "Where were you when he needed you? When he called out for his baby girl in his delirium? You broke his heart, and now you want his money?" Every eye in the room was on me. 23 faces filled with judgment, disgust, and righteous anger. They'd already tried and convicted me in the court of family opinion. I remained seated, my hands folded, my expression neutral. Inside, my heart was shattering all over again, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing it. The screen behind Lindsay was still frozen on Dad's face. And then, without warning, Whitfield hit play. Dad's voice filled the room. "First, I need to apologize to Athena." The room went absolutely still. Lindsay stood frozen mid-gesture, her finger still pointed at me. Marcus's mouth fell open. Every head swiveled from me to the screen, where Dad sat in his final weeks, thin but clear-eyed, his voice steady despite his frailty. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he continued, "and there are things you need to know. Things I should have said years ago but was too proud, too stubborn, too wrong to admit." Lindsay's arm slowly lowered. She turned toward the screen, her face shifting from rage to confusion. What is this? I failed as a father, Dad said, his image filling the wall-mounted screen. And I need you all to know exactly how. Marcus tried to recover his composure, forcing a confident nod. He's probably thanking us for taking care of him, finally acknowledging who his real family was. But something in Dad's tone, in the deliberate way he'd set this up, suggested otherwise. I could feel the shift in the room's energy, like the moment before lightning strikes. My eyes filled with tears. I couldn't help it. This was the first time I'd seen my father's face in 10 years. Even through the video, even knowing he was gone, seeing him made my chest ache with a grief I'd been holding back since I'd heard he'd died. Athena, Dad said, looking directly into the camera as if he could see me through time and space. My daughter, my baby girl, I failed you in the worst way a father can fail, and I need everyone in this room to know the truth about why you left, what you've done since, and why I'm the one who should be begging for forgiveness, not you. Lindsay stumbled backward into her chair. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, and the family that had been so ready to condemn me fell silent, waiting for what came next. This was the moment everything changed. 20 pairs of eyes turned from the screen to stare at me. My siblings' confident smiles began to falter. Sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places, even from beyond the grave. If you've ever had a moment where the tables completely turned on those who wronged you, you know this feeling. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. The revelation that's coming will change everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Now, let me share what my father revealed in that video. Dad's face on the screen looked directly at the camera, at us, at me. His voice was steady, but I could see the effort each word cost him. I failed Athena when she needed me most, he said. 10 years ago, she came to me for help. She was leaving an abusive marriage. Derek had been hurting her, physically, emotionally, systematically breaking her down. She came to me with bruises on her ribs and fear in her eyes, holding her baby boy, begging for support. Gasps rippled through the room. Aunt Carol's hand flew to her mouth. Even Marcus looked stunned. And what did I do? Dad's voice cracked. I chose reputation over my daughter's safety. I told her that marriage was sacred, that she needed to try harder, that divorce would bring shame on our family. I told her if she left him, she shouldn't come back. Lindsay's face had gone pale. She slowly sank into her chair, her earlier righteousness evaporating. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. Dad paused, collecting himself. She was brave enough to leave anyway, to protect herself and her son. She chose survival over family approval, and I punished her for it. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. Several relatives were crying quietly. Cousin Tom had lowered his phone, no longer recording. I was a coward, Dad continued, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I let pride and the fear of gossip override my duty as a father. While Lindsay and Marcus visited me for show, taking photos for social media, planning what they'd do with their inheritance, Athena. He paused, looking directly into the camera. But Athena never abandoned me despite what I did to her. What I'm about to reveal will shock you. For 8 years, Dad's voice filled the silent room. Someone has been paying my medical bills. Anonymous monthly transfers of $5,000, sometimes more when special treatments were needed. Lindsay's head snapped toward Marcus, confusion clear on her face. He shook his head, equally bewildered. Private nurses when Medicare wouldn't cover them. Experimental treatments insurance denied. The best cardiac specialists in Oregon. All paid for by mysterious wire transfers that started arriving exactly 1 month after my first heart attack. Dad paused, and Mr. Whitfield clicked something on his laptop. The screen split, showing bank records alongside Dad's video. Transfer after transfer, month after month, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. I hired a private investigator to find out who was helping me, Dad continued. It took him 6 months to trace through the shell companies and false names, And when he finally found the source, the bank records zoomed in, showing the originating account details. My name wasn't visible, but the dates and amounts were clear. It was Athena, working 2 jobs, sometimes 3, living in a one-bedroom apartment with her son while sending me money for treatments in private hospital suites. She sold her car to pay for my surgery. She worked weekends and nights to cover my nursing care. Tears were streaming down Aunt Carol's face now. Marcus had collapsed into his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. While she struggled as a single mother while you all called her selfish and cold, she was killing herself to keep me alive, never asking for recognition, never telling anyone, never using it as leverage to get back into the family. Dad's image leaned forward, his eyes intense. My other children visited for show. Athena loved in silence. She gave everything while asking for nothing. That is true family. That is real love. Mr. Whitfield stood slowly, picking up the sealed envelope as Dad's video continued playing. And so, Dad's voice said, I've made changes to my will. James, please open the envelope now. The sound of paper tearing seemed impossibly loud in the silent room. Whitfield pulled out a document marked Amendment to the Last Will and Testament of Robert Myers. This amendment was executed 6 weeks before my death, Dad's recorded voice explained. In the presence of 2 witnesses and a notary, while I was of completely sound mind, as verified by Dr. Patricia Hernandez. Whitfield began reading in his measured professional tone. I, Robert Myers, being of sound mind and body, do hereby amend my last will and testament as follows. Lindsay gripped Marcus's arm so tight her knuckles went white. I leave 80% of my estate, including the family home on Laurelhurst and the bulk of my investment portfolio, to my daughter Athena Myers and her son, Caleb Myers. The room erupted. Lindsay let out a strangled cry. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. Several relatives gasped or exclaimed in shock. Whitfield continued reading, raising his voice above the chaos. To Lindsay Patterson and Marcus Myers, I leave $50,000 each, along with my complete collection of family photographs and personal mementos. This can't be legal, Marcus shouted. Dad's voice cut through from the video. I know some of you will be angry, but I'm giving the most to the one who gave the most when she had the least. Athena saved my life, literally and financially, while expecting nothing in return. This is my attempt to right a terrible wrong. The screen showed one final image, a bank statement showing the total of Athena's contributions over 8 years, $537,000. To the child who gave without taking, Dad's voice concluded. This is the least I can do. This is ironclad, Mr. Whitfield stated firmly, setting down the amendment. Your father took every precaution to ensure this could not be contested. 2 separate physicians confirmed his mental capacity. The video provides additional evidence of his intentions. Everything has been properly witnessed, notarized, and filed with the court. We'll sue, Lindsay screamed, jumping to her feet. This isn't fair. We were here. We took care of him. You're welcome to try, Whitfield replied calmly. However, page 3, Section 2 clearly states that any beneficiary who contests this will forfeit their inheritance entirely. You would lose even the $50,000. Marcus pulled out his phone, frantically typing. I'm calling our lawyer right now. This is undue influence. She manipulated him. With anonymous payments he didn't know about until he hired an investigator? Whitfield interrupted. That would be quite a feat of manipulation. He pulled out another folder. I also have here precedent cases, all ruled in favor of similar amendments. Your father consulted with 3 separate estate attorneys to ensure this would stand up to any challenge. Lindsay turned on me, her face twisted with rage. You planned this. You knew. I stood slowly, my legs shaky. For the first time since entering this room, I had everyone's complete attention. But now, instead of contempt, I saw shock, shame, and in some faces, a dawning respect. The estate will be distributed as specified, Whitfield continued. The house transfers immediately. The financial assets will be available within 30 days, pending standard probate procedures. He looked directly at Lindsay and Marcus. Your father was very clear about his wishes, very clear about his reasoning, and very clear about the consequences of challenging them. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick with the weight of reversed fortunes and revealed truths. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, looking at my siblings, who suddenly seemed so much smaller than they had an hour ago. The room waited for me to speak, to gloat, to claim my vindication. But that wasn't who I was. It never had been. I never wanted his money, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the tears. I sent those payments because he was my father. Despite everything, despite the pain and rejection, I loved him. Lindsay's face crumpled. Marcus looked away. Every month when I sent that money, I told myself I was doing it for Caleb, so he could know his grandfather was cared for, even if they never met. I did it because that's what family does. You help, even when it hurts. I turned to face my siblings directly. You can have the money, all of it. I don't want it. Gasps echoed through the room. Even Mr. Whitfield looked surprised. But I'm keeping the house, I continued, my voice growing stronger. Not for me, but for Caleb. He deserves to know where his grandfather lived, to have that connection to his history. He deserves to walk through those rooms and know that despite our broken relationship, there was love there. I paused, looking Lindsay and Marcus directly in the eyes. And you're not welcome there. Either of you. You spent 10 years telling everyone I abandoned this family, while you abandoned basic human decency. The boundary was clear, firm, professional. No hatred, no revenge, just a simple statement of consequence. I forgive you, I said finally. For Caleb's sake and for mine. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean allowing you back into our lives to cause more harm. The room was silent, processing this unexpected response to an unexpected revelation. The silence that followed my words lasted maybe 10 seconds before the room exploded into motion. Cousin Tom quietly deleted the video from his phone, his face flushed with embarrassment. I saw him pocket the device without meeting anyone's eyes. Aunt Carol was the first to approach me, tears still wet on her cheeks. Athena, I'm so sorry. We never knew. If we had known about Derek, about what you went through. We should have asked, I replied quietly. But it's done now. One by one, relatives approached. Some offered awkward apologies, others simply squeezed my shoulder or murmured condolences. Uncle Richard, who hadn't spoken once during the entire meeting, stopped beside my chair. You're a better person than all of us, he said simply. Your father would be proud of your grace today. Lindsay grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She paused at the threshold, turning back to look at me with eyes full of rage, and something else. Maybe regret. Maybe just calculation about what she'd lost. Marcus followed her, but he stopped beside my chair. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he said, "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Mr. Whitfield interjected firmly. "Any harassment or continued challenges will result in legal action." After they left, the room felt lighter somehow. Beth approached hesitantly. "Athena, we never knew about the payments. We believed what they told us." "I know," I said. "That was the point. It was never about recognition." Mr. Whitfield handed me a set of keys, old-fashioned brass ones on a simple ring. "The house is yours, Ms. Myers. Your father would be proud of how you handled this today." The keys felt heavier than they should, weighted with 10 years of pain and redemption. 6 months later, the full consequences of that day had rippled out in ways none of us could have predicted. Lindsay's real estate business had taken a significant hit. Word travels fast in Portland's professional circles, and the story of how she'd treated her abused sister while taking credit for care she didn't provide had spread. She'd lost 3 major clients and 2 business partners. Marcus had applied for a $500,000 business loan to expand his investment firm. The loan was rejected. The bank officer, who happened to be a friend of Mr. Whitfield's, had heard about Marcus's behavior at the will reading. Reputation matters in finance, he'd been told. Meanwhile, I'd renovated Dad's house, our house now, turning it into a real home for the first time in years. Caleb had chosen his grandfather's old study as his bedroom, surrounding himself with the books and photos Dad had left behind. He was thriving at his new school, finally stable after years of apartment hopping. I'd started hosting monthly dinners for the family members who'd apologized and shown genuine remorse. Aunt Carol came regularly, bringing her famous lasagna and stories about Dad I'd never heard. Uncle Richard helped with house repairs, teaching Caleb woodworking in the garage where Dad had once built furniture. The biggest irony came 3 months after the will reading. I used part of the inheritance to create a scholarship fund in Dad's name for women leaving abusive relationships. The first recipient was a young mother with 2 kids, fleeing a situation painfully similar to mine 10 years ago. Lindsay and Marcus had tried to contest the will despite the warnings. True to the terms, they lost even their $50,000. That money went into the scholarship fund too. They wanted money and lost everything else. Aunt Carol had said at our last dinner, "You gave everything and gained a family." The restraining order became necessary after Lindsay showed up at Caleb's school, trying to convince him I'd stolen his inheritance. The principal called me immediately, and the police were involved. The judge granted a 2-year protection order without hesitation after reviewing the evidence. Marcus took a different approach, spreading rumors in professional circles that I'd manipulated a dying man. But when people learned the full truth, the anonymous payments, the years of sacrifice, his credibility evaporated. His own business partners distanced themselves. I established clear rules for our new life. The family members who were welcome knew the boundaries. No discussing Lindsay or Marcus, no trying to mediate or reconcile, and absolutely no sharing information about our lives with them. Respect or remove became our family motto. Caleb was thriving with the stability. I'd enrolled him in therapy to process not just the family drama, but the years of instability that came before. He was learning about healthy boundaries by watching me enforce them. "Mom, why did Aunt Lindsay lie about you?" he'd asked one evening. "Sometimes people create stories that make them feel better about their choices," I'd explained. "We can't control what others say. We can only control how we respond." The house had become what it never was in my childhood, a sanctuary. I'd removed all the formal furniture, the cold decorations that screamed wealth but whispered loneliness. Now it was filled with comfortable couches, Caleb's art on the walls, and the sound of laughter during our monthly dinners. I'd also returned to therapy myself, working through a decade of trauma and rejection. My therapist helped me see that setting boundaries wasn't cruel. It was necessary for healing. "Family isn't obligatory," she'd said. "It's chosen through actions, maintained through respect, and sometimes protected through distance." Looking back now, I realize that vindication came exactly when I'd stopped looking for it. For 10 years, I'd sent those payments with no expectation of acknowledgement, no hope of reconciliation. I'd simply done what felt right, even when it hurt. The truth has a way of surfacing, though not always how we expect. Dad's video message wasn't just an apology. It was a mirror held up to everyone who'd chosen comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. Some people looked away from that mirror. Others, like Aunt Carol and Uncle Richard, faced what they saw and chose to change. I taught Caleb the most important lesson through all of this. Give without expecting returns, but never allow yourself to be diminished by those who take without gratitude. We volunteered together at the women's shelter now, helping other families rebuild after escaping abuse. The house that had once echoed with judgment and disappointment now hosted birthday parties, study groups, and holiday dinners. But only for those who'd earned their place through respect and genuine care. The family photos on the walls told a new story, not of the family I was born into, but the one I'd chosen and built. Lindsay and Marcus had taught me something valuable too, though not what they'd intended. They showed me that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, loving deeply, and maintaining your integrity even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. Your value isn't determined by others' opinions, I tell Caleb often. It's determined by how you treat people when you have nothing to gain. The $8 million didn't change who I was. It just revealed who everyone else had been all along. And in that revelation, I found my freedom. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been the black sheep of your family, or had to walk away from toxic relationships to save yourself, I want you to know you're not alone. Your worth isn't measured by their acceptance. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. What boundaries have you had to set with family? Share your story in the comments below. Let's support each other. And if this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Subscribe for more stories of quiet strength, winning over loud ignorance.